pleasure for me to introduce Father Juan Carranco, who is a priest at St. Paul in Nampa. Father Juan Carranco comes from Mexico City, and he's been in Nampa for a couple of years. I'm going to ask him not only to pray for the food that we have eaten, but also to pray for the food that's not there yet. I'm also going to ask him to pray for, if any of you have read today's Statesman, you will know that there was an incident of racism and religious intolerance over in Nampa, Idaho, whereby an individual took acid or some other form of things and sprayed it on somebody's lawn in the neighborhood where a black had moved in, and carved out the word nigger. So I think we are appropriately here trying to fight this kind of bigotry. And I think it's appropriate for Father to address that kind of issue through prayer. Father Juan Carranco.
Buenas tardes, soy el Padre Juan Carranco, como ya me presentó Jessy, muy amable Jessy. Vengo a recibir de ustedes el buen ejemplo y el ánimo, porque veo, como dice la Sagrada Escritura, qué hermoso es vivir todos como hermanos, todos sin ninguna excepción, sin tener en cuenta religión o raza o clase social o nacionalidad. Y ya empecé a inspirarme, ya empecé a mirar este espectáculo tan hermoso de vivir todos juntos aquí como hermanos y también de ver que la mayoría son jóvenes. La mayoría son jóvenes, magnífico. Voy a bendecir la mesa, como dice Jesse, por los alimentos que ya tomamos y por los que vamos a tomar todavía. Los bendecimos en nuestra persona, ¿verdad? En todo caso. Voy a empezar por el español porque el inglés se me dificulta, a pesar de que empecé a hablar inglés o a aprender inglés desde 1940. Y en 47 ya andaba yo por este país, terminaron mis estudios de inglés. Pero todavía no lo hablo suficientemente bien porque he dejado de practicarlo mucho tiempo. Yo he vivido nacionalmente casi todo el tiempo. Entonces es una bendición que la introduzco de esta manera. Habló el Señor Dios y dio esta orden, así bendecirán a mi pueblo. Que el Señor tu Dios te bendiga y te guarde. Ilumine el Señor su rostro sobre ti y te sea propicio. Que el Señor te muestre su rostro y te conceda su paz. Dios de bondad infinita, que en la fracción del pan fortaleces la unidad de tus hijos, bendícenos a nosotros y estos dones tuyos y concédenos la gozosa participación en esta mesa común, alimente continuamente nuestro espíritu fraternal. Por Jesucristo nuestro Señor. Amén. Y esta es una de las inspiraciones de la Biblia, de la palabra de Dios, ¿verdad? Que dice, es el libro del profeta Isaías, dice así: cuando partas tu pan con el hambriento y sacies el estómago del indigente, brillará tu luz en las tinieblas y tu oscuridad se volverá mediodía. El Señor te dará reposo permanente, en el desierto saciará tu hambre. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts which we are going to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. En el nombre del Padre, del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo. Amén. Ahora al ataque. Terminado.
Next on the agenda, we have a young lady that worked very hard on this conference. She happens also to work for Hewlett Packard. and she happens to be the president of the Idaho Association of Affirmative Action. Let us welcome Cindy Stempill. Cindy,
Good afternoon. The reason I'm here today is to represent the Idaho Association for Affirmative Action. For those of you who are unfamiliar with our organization, it's a nonprofit organization that is geared towards providing education and support for people who work in the human resource field in the area of affirmative action. And one of the things that we do as a part of our organization is provide scholarships to minority students who are attending any of the Idaho universities or colleges. And at this conference, we thought it was particularly appropriate that we recognize those students for all of their hard work. And this year, we did something a little different. We solicited donations from Idaho companies for these scholarships. And gratefully, we had a number of companies respond, and I wanted to recognize those companies as well. First of all, what I'd like to do is ask Elisa Lopez. It's kind of hard to tell where she's at. Elisa, are you here? Oh, here you are. Do you want to come forward? We asked some of the students to come to the luncheon today to talk to you a little bit about themselves, what they're doing in school, and how the scholarship money that has been provided to them help them in terms of their education. Someone else who wasn't here at the beginning, and I don't know if she's here now, Emma Salinas. Okay, it looks like she couldn't make it. So what I'd like to do is introduce Elisa right now and let her talk to you about the scholarship and about herself, and then I'd like to give some recognition to the companies who provided the scholarships.
As she said, my name is Elisa Lopez, and I'm from Nampa, and I'm a senior at Coaliton, Idaho, a double major in psychology and zoology, and I'm a pre-med, and I apply to medical school next year. And basically, I'm here to tell you that I'm living proof as an example. I started, like most of you in high school, I had an interest in medicine, but I wasn't really sure I had the guts to go through everything to make it to medical school. Thanks to scholarship programs like the Affirmative Action, it gave me not only financial support, but it also gave me a drive that showed me that some people in the community really care and really believe in me. And that's always an added incentive to know that. I come to you going into medical school, and it really makes me feel good to see a lot of young people out here supporting this issue. It's very important. And there's been a lot of hard times through my college career, a lot. I worked 3 part-time jobs at one time, going to school full-time. But I made it, and it was all worth it. So if anybody tells you you can't do something, you tell them you're wrong, because you can.
Thanks, Elisa. I'm very proud to be a part of the Idaho Association for Affirmative Action. We are able to offer these scholarships. This year has been a particularly exciting year because we were able to offer 9 $750 scholarships, and that was an increase. Last year we were only able to offer 5, so that was a significant increase. First, before I recognize the companies who made that increase in the number of scholarships possible, I'd like to recognize all of the students who were given scholarships and tell you the universities that they're attending. Emma Salinas is attending Boise State University, Bob Stone attending Idaho State University, Griselda Swasky attending Boise State University, Maria Gutierrez attending Idaho State University, Jose Villalobos attending Boise State University, Tammy Pham attending Idaho State University, Jose Elizondo attending Idaho State University, Cody Parker attending Idaho State University. All of those students worked very hard. We had a number of students to select from in terms of the scholarships, and it was very difficult, but these students are doing an outstanding job. importantly, in terms of the Idaho Association's affirmative actions response to these students and their needs, we had a great response from the community this year. And I'd like to recognize the companies who donated money to our scholarship fund. Orida Foods donated a scholarship, First Security Bank, Hewlett Packard, Morrison Knudsen, Idaho Power, Idaho Nuclear Engineering Laboratories, an engineering group from EG&G, and the Idaho Statesman were all companies who donated monies towards the scholarship fund, and I appreciate, as well as the association appreciates their donations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cindy. It should also be noted that the IAAA did not have their yearly conference. They're here as part of their yearly conference, so that's quite a sacrifice. Next. Let me introduce the Miracle Temple Choir from Boise. They're directed by Mildred Martin. They're the choir.
You just claim the victory, cause the battle has already been won. Through the Son of Jesus Christ, Son of the living one, which just made me to see what the Lord has done, which just made me. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. See what the Lord has done. You just claim the victory, cause the battle has already been won. Due to the power of still Jesus, the Son of the living one. It's just amazing. See what the Lord has done. It's amazing. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. Oh Lord,
privilege of knowing the next individual many years ago when he was a very young man. As a matter of fact, he was just a kid. His father was in the Air Force here in Mountain Home, and I had the privilege of recruiting and hiring, or arranged for the hiring of his father. His name was Joe Love, went to work for the Bureau of Land Management, and became a very dear and personal friend of me and my family. I also had the privilege of seeing this young man grow up, go to college, and become a leader right here in this institution. He became the president of the student body. He was recognized with the Jefferson Award. And I also had the privilege of marching with him 2 years in a row when he led a group of us from the university to the State House when we were fighting to put Martin Luther King's birthday as a holiday in the state. I can recall him marching up front, myself and 4 of my grandkids going along and making me feel so proud. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce my friend, Eric Love.
I'd like to welcome all of you here today, and especially all of the students. I look forward to spending a few hours with you after lunch with Jesse Jackson Jr. and again the following workshop. I'm very happy you all made it, and I'm glad you all made it safely. As some of you know, I love public speaking, and I would never turn down an opportunity to address over 500 people. But luckily for you, I'm just here to introduce our keynote speaker today. And so I'm going to get right to work. Mr. Jesse Jackson Jr. is the second oldest child of the Reverend Jesse Jackson. He has a bachelor's degree in finance from the University of North Carolina, A&T University. He was voted one of the outstanding young men in America for 1987 and one of the 30 leaders of the future in Ebony magazine, November of 1989. He has since then earned his master's in theology, and he is presently working on his law degree at the University of Illinois in Champaign. I've had a little bit of time, an opportunity to spend with Mr. Jackson today, and in that short period of time I've learned a great deal. I've been inspired. You're in for a real treat. I'm so excited about him being here and addressing you today at lunch and also the workshop afterwards. So please join me in a warm welcome for Mr. Jesse Jackson Jr.
Good afternoon. Let me give honor and praise to God for yet another opportunity to be of service. I asked Eric earlier, along with Bill Wasmuth and President Stewart, what it was I could say today. They responded almost simultaneously. Jesse Jr., whatever you do, just do 3 things. Be brief, be adequate, and be appropriate. I informed both Eric, Bill, and President Stewart that in keeping with the Jesse Jackson tradition, I'd be adequate and appropriate. Brevity is not something take this opportunity to say what a source of enjoyment it was for me to hear those young singers who sang just a few minutes ago. Let's give them another round of applause. I'd also like to add what an honor and a pleasure it is for me to be at a conference such as this. No one can deny that at a time in our country as this, the Northwest Coalition Against Malicious Harassment certainly plays a role and should be emulated as well as imitated all across this country. And so to those founders, you certainly made my heart leap with joy to know there are people who care, who are sensitive enough to reach out beyond themselves, beyond their cultures, to bring people together. I asked my father a long time ago what the key to writing a good speech was. He said, Jesse Jr., whatever you do, write a very good beginning and write a very good ending. And if you put the two as close together as possible, you'll have a good speech. I'm going to try and take advantage of some of that advice. Let me also add that I'm also grateful to God for the release of John Jesse Turner. I had the opportunity last night, because of the weather in the city of Chicago, to be delayed almost 4 hours where I waited in O'Hare Airport with the Ronnie Their hearts are to be made happy, knowing that their son will be returned on this day, certainly to a great celebration here in Boise, but around this country. We are honored and grateful to God for his safe return home. Let me also offer, before I begin, one disclaimer. If you hear anything in my speech that you've heard in the past from my namesake, it is plagiarism. Jesse Jackson Sr. has been giving a lot of my speeches lately. This has been a very difficult period in the history of our country. We have witnessed an attack on the principles of justice and equality emanating from the highest levels of our elected leadership. We have seen an assault on the civil rights of working people. The retirement of Thurgood Marshall, the confirmation of Clarence Thomas has evoked both fears and concerns about the direction of justice in this country. The untimely lifting of sanctions in South Africa. We should lift sanctions in South Africa when apartheid leaves, about the same time. Last night, this morning, we've heard that there's a new civil rights bill on the table. As excited as I am about having a civil rights bill for both African Americans and Hispanics and women and American natives in this country, let us not forget, whenever you hear the word bipartisan, that should indicate to women in this country, as well as African Americans, that some rights have probably been lost. Let us not be too happy with the Civil Rights Bill until we've had the opportunity to analyze and read the specific language. After all, the first Civil Rights Bill that was rejected just a year and a half ago. The only difference between it and the 1964 bill was that women in this country, for the first time, were allowed to bring sexual harassment charges and stand the probability of winning punitive damages in a jury trial if they could prove on the job that they had been sexually discriminated against. The President of the United States referred to that as a quota bill. Our nation is at a crossroads. I'm honored that so many young students have come today, in part because, unlike any other time in the history of our country, young people face some of the greatest challenges. This is the first time in the history of our country, according to the Children's Defense Fund, headed by Marian Wright Edelman in Washington, that young people are the poorest segment of the nation's economy. 1 out of every 5 children is poor. 7 million white children, 4 million black children, 2.5 million American natives and Hispanic children. On the table in Washington today, there is a proposal to build more jails than schools. While it costs less than $10,000 for a single year to go to Idaho State University on a full academic scholarship, while costing slightly more than $160,000 for a single year to go to Idaho State Penitentiary on a penitentiary scholarship. It costs less to educate young people on the front side of life than to incarcerate or lock them up or jail them up on the backside. Our nation is at a crossroads. We are forced to keep our eyes on a path towards justice, our feet focused towards a coalition that we might be able to build and make a better nation. The Cold War is over. And yet the peace dividend has been squandered and the people have been robbed. We've maintained a first-rate military at great cost, yet we've declined into a fourth-rate economic power. We fought a war that cost us billions, yet failed to bring peace and prosperity in the Middle East. America is at a crossroads. At this crossroads, there is a moral center. There's also a political center. At the political center, politicians choose winning and losing at all costs, with a focus on the short term. We must seek out, as young people, as people of good conscience, the moral center. Put an emphasis on what's right and what's wrong. We have a history of struggle in this country, of people fighting for the moral center. Their rights over the political center and the status quo. At the founding of this country, slavery, genocide of American natives was at the political center, at the moral center. Treaties, an abolition movement, at the political center. Women denied the right to vote as a matter of law, the moral center. A women's suffrage movement, seeking out to make this democracy a democracy for everybody. We cannot let ourselves be distracted from the fundamental challenges of this day by race-based politics. Quite frankly, we are now facing a White House that consciously uses the politics of fear to divide the nation in pursuit of electoral victory. Jesse Jr., what does that mean? We invited you to this conference to talk about malicious harassment, not about politics. At that level, they're one and the same. Allow me to make my point. When Jesse Helms was running for the United States Senate in the last election against Harvey Gantt, he played a commercial that I refer to now as the strong black hand theory. This commercial aired 3 days before a national election. Jesse Helms, endorsed by the President of the United States. It showed an older white hand on the television commercial reaching out for a job. Then it showed a strong black hand called a affirmative action, reaching and grabbing the white hand and taking the job. If that same black hand were dribbling a basketball in the NBA championship called Michael Jordan, it would be all right. If that same black hand were carrying a football or hitting a home run in the World Series, it would be all right. But that same black hand, looking for a job in America, trying to get into law school or universities across this country, national security risk. Not just black hands, also the hands of females, the hands of minorities, of American natives, of Latin Americans. National security risk. I call that the strong black hand theory. The Civil Rights Bill sought to return the law to where it was before Reagan and Bush gutted it, called the Quota Bill. David Duke in Louisiana. Just an extreme end of the same politics. From Willie Horton to David Duke, race-based politics divides and it distracts. Where have our jobs gone? Jobs have not gone from white to black. They've gone from our country to countries abroad. But let's not Asian bash. That's not right. That's immoral. That's not pursuing the moral center. Our jobs did not go to Japan, to Taiwan, or to South Korea. They didn't take jobs from us. U.S. corporations took jobs to them, pursuing unorganized and cheap labor there over and against organized labor here. Automated factories here, and yet an automated factory can't feed a family. 1983, General Electric made $10 billion and paid no taxes. Number one exporter from Taiwan are not the Taiwanese people. No need to Taiwanese bash. Number one exporter from Taiwan is General Electric, an American corporation. Made $10 billion in 1983 and paid no federal taxes. General Electric, which owns RCA, which owns NBC, which advertises on television with Bob Hope, Buy America. America and shipped our jobs overseas. In McAllen, Texas, the Zenith Corporation, which used to be based in Chicago, employed 3,000 people. Moved to McAllen, Texas, where they presently employ 2 people. Just 4 miles south of the border in Mexico, they employ 3,500 people. Where they pay Mexican workers less than $6 per day. No need to bash at Mexicans. Moral center. How many of you in the audience, show me by raising your hands, how many of you know someone in America who owns a VCR? Raise your hand. Put your hand down. There is not one VCR made in America. Not one. How many of you know somebody who personally owns an MX missile? Will you raise your hand? Why is there a trade desk? Because we're making it, but ain't nobody buying. Japanese, we're not gonna let y'all make big things. We're gonna make big things, you all make little things. We'll make big things like MX missile, M1 tank, B1 bomber. You make little things, like microchip, like computer disk, like spend less than 2% of your gross national product on defense. We'll defend you. Spend the other 98% of your gross national product on reinvesting in your country and in the minds of your people. We'll spend our gross national product to the tune of 30% of it on big things that almost no one has a need for. George Bush, President of the United States, is first and foremost a politician, not a leader with moral vision, attempting to bring people together like this conference. But victory, electoral victory, the ultimate end. We must begin to judge all of our politicians by understanding. I think about George Wallace 40 years ago standing in the door of a schoolhouse and said no to desegregation today, tomorrow, and forever. He promised white America protection from blacks and drove a wedge of hatred deep into the heart of the nation. George Bush today stands in the door of the White House. Promises, he says no to quotas today, tomorrow, and forever. He promises to protect white America from blacks and from women entering the workforce. He promises to protect corporations from lawsuits for discrimination, for putting the burden of proof on the victim. And yet George Bush does not protect working America, white, black, or brown, male or female, from banks closing, from 2 million manufacturing jobs going overseas, from corporate raiders leveraging small business. He does not protect American farmers, 800,000 of whom have lost their farms in the last decade. And yet he's become a master at name games. Well, Jesse Jr., what do you mean by name games? Well, let's look at a few of them. And I guess that's part of what we have to learn at this conference, to recognize that they try and pit people off against other people, particularly in times of recessionary periods in our country. Even our justice system reflects this. In our society, whether you're black, white, or brown, if you're poor and you steal, poor people steal. Rich people in our country embezzle. Poor people in our country steal, get locked up, and go to San Quentin. Rich, embezzle, get locked up, go to San Clemente, play golf. Poor people lie. Rich people prevaricate. You steal a bicycle in urban America, it's called grand larceny, and get jailed up. Steal an SNL, bad management, get bailed out. Most stealing. You live in urban America. You live in a housing project. Suburban America. Subsidized housing. All of these people, including Clarence Cox, spend some time on him in a few minutes. All of them argue about how hard they've worked. And yet all of them, from George Bush, Dan Quayle, and Clarence Thomas, all of them have a government job. They argue for meritocracy. In an institutionalized class and caste social order. They argue for race blindness in a race-conscious society. When I get up every morning and pray, I do not ask the Lord for blindness. I ask Him for sight. I want to celebrate our diversity. I want to see what makes you different than me. It's the argument that we make that makes us one. Clarence Thomas is but an indication of how those forces of power will use even minorities against other minorities. Long before the racial harassment, the sexual harassment issue, we should have not supported Clarence Thomas for two reasons. One, he was unqualified. The second issue is he was in opposition to the very movement that has brought us together. He promised them, as a conservative ideologue, he would fundamentally destroy and denounce the legacy of Martin Luther King, of Viola Luiso, of Square Goodman and Cheney. That he'd come the entire route from Yale Law School to Holy Cross, to the EEOC, to the Supreme Court by merit alone. And then, when the stuff really hit the fan, with Anita Hill's testimony, who struck me, by the way, as a very credible and sensitive woman. When it finally hit the fan, the very first thing he ran to was race, race, race. He said he didn't want to stand and be assassinated. Never before in the history of our country has an assassin gone through 3 metal detectors, up 4 flights of stairs, entered the Senate Judiciary, and shot across 4 desks of secretaries, a bureaucrat. He's not of the tradition of John F. Kennedy, of Bobby Kennedy, of Martin Luther King, of Malcolm X, of Medgar Evers. He's not of that struggle, those people who traditionally in our country have been associated with assassinations. That was a decoy. Then he used some crazy term like, this amounts to a technological lynching. Any African-American man. Then he mentioned something else about stereotype. Any African-American man who can marry a southern white woman in Georgia, move to Virginia, walk into the Senate Judiciary Committee with Strom Thurmond on one hand, Jesse Helms on the other hand. I know I'm preaching. Why is this issue of ending racist, malicious harassment of importance to me? It's important to all of us because at some level all of us are victims. But we must look beyond ourselves. That is our greatest challenge, to look beyond ourselves. Half of all of the people of the world are Asian. Half of that number Chinese. 1 of every 8 persons in the world is an African. 1/4 of that number Nigerian. To the south of us, wow. I can only trust George Bush had something to do with that. To the south of us. I'm sorry, in the ministry they teach us that we have to bring light to dark places. To the south of us. Most of our neighbors speak Latin and Portuguese in the main. Most people in the world are not white, but black, brown, poor, non-Christian, and don't speak English. That's very important. Why? Because the way they view the world and the way we must view the world must be in consort with people in the world, not living above the world, but living with the world. And so, when we fight to end racist harassment in Idaho, we're also fighting to end racist harassment in South Africa. We are part of the same fabric, part of the same thread. Why is it important? There's not one day of my own life that I do not wake up coming to terms with my own racism, with my own sexism, with my own classism. I am human, and I'm admitting to all of the above. I am both racist, I am both sexist, and I am both classist. All of us are. And if we're going to become better people, we must all acknowledge that. Because our constant struggle is to see people as people, but first by recognizing our own shortcomings. It's our constant struggle. Now, how pervasive is it? It's so pervasive that it even affects our foreign policy and how we treat other nations in the world. When you think that we spent $10 trillion, $10 trillion, over the last 40 years preparing for war with the Soviet Union. 10 trillion and did not fire one bullet. Not one bullet. Spent less than 6 months negotiating with Saddam Hussein and dropped more armaments on those Arab people than we did in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, and war since then combined. How do we view Arab people? As humans or as some fundamental fanatic? Moral authority. When we flagged just a few years ago under the Reagan administration ships out of Kuwait and act like flagging Kuwaiti ships, which the Iraqi people considered to be an act of war, as if it wasn't. We lose our moral authority. When we bomb a country like Panama, a country that has no air force, and yet we use our most sophisticated weapon, the stealth bomber, kill 4,000 Panamanians of darker hue, capture Noriega, and yet we still not curtail the illegal importation of drugs into our own country. It's part of the race question. When we can invade Grenada, because this country, an island is small, the size of an ant compared to our country, for building an airport, kill its leadership, rescue some American students, all of whom have returned to school in Grenada now. And they built their airport. Political diversion for the Reagan administration, because American soldiers had been killed in the Middle East. We divert Americans' attention to Grenada. When we can condemn Saddam Hussein for invading Kuwait, but can't condemn the Soviet Union for invading the Baltics, I can only think that race plays a part in that picture. Every time a person of color anywhere in the world is fighting for their freedom, we call them communists. Person of non-color in Europe fighting for their freedom, they're a freedom fighter. So Nelson Mandela in South Africa, leader of 23 million Native African people, is called a communist by our government. Being oppressed by less than 4 million white people in South Africa. And there is no way, just no way anyone can tell me that if 4 million blacks in Africa were oppressing 24 million white Americans, or white anybody for that matter, that as a matter of conscious policy, we would not be liberating them with arms. Because we'd be fighting for democracy. One man, one vote. That all of life does not center around the issue of race. It's preeminent, but it's not centered. I was in Hamlet, North Carolina, about 2 weeks ago. In Hamlet, North Carolina, about 2 months ago, a fire broke out at a chicken factory. 25 women were killed in that fire. 75 other women injured. Only 100 people worked there. After all the press did their big hoopla about the fire and a lot of condolences went out, several days later it was discovered that the owner of the chicken factory had bolted the doors shut from the outside. The women suffocated and they burned to death because they could not exit through the regular exits. Those women were not just killed by a fire. They were killed by a body of laws from Virginia around to Texas known as right-to-work laws. These right-to-work laws would not let those women organize and get a labor union to fight to change the work environment that they work in. The owner of the chicken factory would ask, "Why did you bolt the doors from the outside?" You know what his response was? "Because I felt the women would steal the chicken wings." Why have I been hard on Clarence Thomas and the Supreme Court? Because women from Virginia around to Texas, Latin Americans from Virginia around to Texas, African Americans from Virginia around to Texas deserve relief from a justice system that will be sensitive to women and minorities in the work environment who are denied the right to organize. I was in Hamlet. No, not Hamlet. I was in Virginia this time at the Purdue Chicken Factory. So Purdue Chicken they advertise on TV? There was an older white lady there, about 61 years old. She had been, for almost 20-some years, picking the wings off of the feathers off the chickens. So on a trip with my father, she said, Reverend Jackson, what they do sometimes is they speed up the chicken belt, and we have to pick even faster. And so the reason I can't move my elbow, and the reason my fingers are like this is because I've been picking chickens for 20 years, the feathers off the chickens. She has no pension fund. She's 63. She works at minimum wage. Sex harassment. She has no means through which she can address her grievances. Harassment. Why is the issue of harassment so keen to me? I'm the second Jackson in the history of Jacksons to graduate from college. My father was the first. I'm the first Jackson to have a master's degree, higher education from college. Certainly the first to have a law degree. My mother didn't even have a college degree. My great-grandfather was an American native who married my great-great-grandmother. who was raped by the sheriff, who was the slave owner known as Mr. Cox. They got married, they begat a child and named him Noah. My grandfather Noah married a Native American. Noah, back then doing as men do, had an affair with someone which had begat the child Jesse. So my father's first name was Jesse Robinson, but he never took that name. He was adopted by my grandmother's eventual father, Jackson. I'm the byproduct of that relationship. Harassment. At some level, all of us are victims of a certain form of harassment. All of us have a story to tell. So that's the history of my lineage. I'm particularly concerned, thank God for Anita Hill, that this level of harassment has been raised to a new level of American consciousness. Because it affects us all. When you think in 1991, that a group of all-white men, almost like an all-white golf club in 1991. I know y'all don't have none of that in Idaho. Called the Senate, can get together and conspire to deny a woman who makes legitimate allegations about harassment in the workplace. You can only be concerned and recognize that the Senate of the United States is unrepresentative of the American population. And so, during those hearings when they would ask questions about work and work ethic, of which neither of them had known anything. They had a kind of Star Wars shield, a kind of philosophical debate, a discourse above the people. Clarence Thomas responded to their questions by talking about his poverty. When asked about his position on the issue of affirmative action, shooting above the nominee, he responded by talking about meritocracy and his work ethic. When asked about Roe v. Wade, he said he had never heard of the case. And you think about that. Here his wife is a pro-life activist. He's never heard of the case. And you think about this. Any justice on the United States Supreme Court who has never heard of Roe v. Wade is either lying or uninformed, both of which should disqualify you for the court. Isn't that right? I trust women enough to choose. Personally. Thank God I'm not a politician. I may have another view. But I trust women's right to choose, and I respect that right. The Constitution of the United States does not even speak to the issue of reproductive rights. It's not even an issue that judges should even qualify. It's a matter strictly for the legislature, one that the people must fight out with the Congress. So for the court to even be politicizing the issue of a woman's right to choose versus the issues of life is unrepresentative of the reality of American women in 1991. And in the final analysis, I know I'm running out of time. I get the impression here that President Stewart wants me to stop. We need a moratorium on excuses. A moratorium on excuses. live in a democracy. However much you may criticize the Clarence Thomas nomination, we are a better nation today on the issue of sexual harassment than we were 3 weeks ago. We are a better nation. However painful and agonizing it was to lose John F. Kennedy in 1963, it was through his death that a conservative Congress passed the most difficult legislation in the history of this country, the Civil Rights Bill, the Public Accommodations Bill, the right to vote. No matter how agonizing the death of Martin Luther King was for so many of us, we became a better nation when we began to judge people by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. And so, Father, through crucifixion, we are made to remember on the third day, there's a resurrection. Joy comes in the morning. A moratorium on excuses. Stop complaining about what we don't have. Start using what we got. You people in our history who did just that, as I prepare to leave you. You think about Stevie Wonder, who didn't have eyesight, but he had insight. He let his hands play what his heart felt. He used what he had. Mary McLeod Bethune had 5 children and a cabin. Went on to form Bethune-Cookman College, one of the great colleges of the rest of the world. But she used what she had. All Magic Johnson had was a basketball. Hank Aaron had a bat. Jim Brown had a football. Diane Carroll, all she had was an axe, but they used what they had. All George Washington Carver had was a peanut. All Rosa Parks had was a hard dick. It was a new way, but they used what they had. Father, all Moses had was a rod. Job had patience. Paul had a principle. But they used what they had. Stop complaining about what you don't have. Register and vote. Get involved in the process. Raise your picket signs higher. Challenge your boss on the job about harassment. Stop complaining about what you don't have. Start using what you got. Keep hope alive. God bless you.
Tumbling, gonna come tumbling down, gonna come a tumbling, gonna come tumbling down, gonna come a tumbling, gonna come tumbling down, gonna come a tumbling, gonna come tumbling down, gonna come. This whole world is round as a ball, there's only one side to it. Go down, gonna come. This whole world might build a wall, you drive a barrier through it. There is one earth, one life, one blood. We come from one another. We only die when we try to live separate from each other.